All right, let's get it. Drive time Thursday afternoon. 16 minutes, 14 minutes, 15 minutes exactly right now after the hour of 2 o'clock on a beautiful summer Thursday afternoon here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. The sun is shining. And as it is every single day, it's good to have you along for the ride. Spence Checketts behind the mic, Porter Larson behind the glass today, producing the program. Marathon 8-hour radio shift last night, starting at 2, ended about 9:45. As we took you through the first round of the NBA draft. And we are going to do the same tonight for the second round, where we will break down players that you've never heard of and several of whom will never play in the NBA. But maybe we'll get, a Draymond Green, a Paul Millsap, something like that, a second rounder that actually makes a difference. But we will talk draft today. We'll talk Jazz today. We will talk the boldness of young Austin Ainge and what it could mean for the Utah Jazz moving forward. A lot of people applauding what the Jazz did last night. A lot of A-plus grades, a lot of celebration. And the fact of the matter is we never know. We just have no idea how these young prospects are going to turn out. But Ace Bailey, Walter Clayton Jr., the newest members of the Utah Jazz, and Jazz brass seem to be very, very excited about who Austin Ainge described the two players that they viewed as best-case scenario if they were able to walk away. Now, let me be clear. Every team says that. It's kind of like if you're a college football fan, National Signing Day rolls around. Yeah, we got everybody we wanted. We got everybody we offered. No, you didn't. Why are you the 45th ranked class in the country? But coaches are going to coach. Front offices are going to give you the front office spin. But I like it. I like what they did. We'll talk about it, and we'll talk about what could be next for the Jazz. We'll talk some NBA offseason. And we'll get to all the storylines surrounding round one and get you ready for round two tonight. There still are a ton of rumors flying about the Jazz during this offseason, what they could do, what they're looking to do. Minor trade made about 30 minutes ago. The Brooklyn Nets, who made all 5 of their picks last night, are trading number 36 in the draft tonight to the Phoenix Suns for 2 future second-round picks. The Suns have 36, 52, and 59 tonight as they continue to try to fill out their roster after moving on from Kevin Durant. The Utah Mammoth, I almost said hockey club, but we moved on from it. The Utah Mammoth made a trade yesterday. We'll talk about that on the show today. I like it. We're going to say goodbye to a couple of young players who are pretty exciting, but I think this is a good move by Bill Armstrong, who continues to impress me with his pedigree, his knowledge, and his ability to execute. So a lot to do on the show. Diego Luna was named an All-Star yesterday, RSL's young midfielder. Second straight All-Star appearance for Diego. The last time that happened for RSL was way back in 2013, 2014, when the Wall of the Wasatch, Nick Raimondo himself, made consecutive All-Star games. Kyle Beckerman did too, Javier Morales, but been a while. So we'll deal with RSL on the program today, in addition to all the other stuff that we have going on. Justin Tucker gets a 10-week suspension. Of course, he was let go by the Ravens. Not a good look for Justin Tucker. We'll see if he gets picked up by any team. Not a lot of off-season NFL or college football news right now. Kind of a dead time for the sport that drives a lot of the content as fall is approaching. We're, 65 days, I believe, away from kickoff for Utah football, but we got a lot to do on the program today. Our first guest, Richard Smith, who was alongside for round one coverage of the NBA draft last night, and will be back tonight to take us through round two of the NBA draft. We will take you up until the Jazz draft, and maybe we'll get lucky and the Jazz will trade the pick before we launch into the coverage. Smitty will stop by. Pablo Mastroeni, head coach of RSL, will join us. Neil Smith, former general manager of the New York Rangers, will break down the Utah Mammoth trade, adding a new winger, and we'll talk some offseason NHL. We'll do some sports court on a Thursday, as we do all the time with our friends from Handy and Handy. We'll launch into the 5 o'clock hour of the program, and then after we say goodnight, it's time for round two of the NBA draft with myself and Richard Smith right here on ESPN 700. Richard Smith, Pablo Mastroeni, Neil Smith, Sports Court with our friends Handy and Handy, me, Spence Checketts, all of you, the great listeners, and that guy, Porter Larson, who is high, not just high right now. You're high on Ace Bailey. Or I don't know. I'm not judging. Maybe, you snuck in something before the show.
Just Ace Bailey. Just Ace Bailey.
You like a little Ace Bailey, don't you?
I think he's really talented. Here's the deal, Spence. I think the Jazz may have got the second or third most talented player in the draft. I don't necessarily think that he's going to be the second or third best player. I think Cooper Flagg has a really good cushion in that regard. I am really high on the number 2 pick. But listen, if you have a guy with that high of a ceiling at number 5 and you have the assets to move up later in the first round, it just made sense to take the best player available. And then if you are really high on Walter Clayton Jr., you package a few things together, you move up a few picks, and you take that guy. And that is what the Jazz did. That is what they executed last night. And it feels like that was kind of what they planned on doing last night. And kudos to them for doing so. We'll see if it pays dividends. Obviously, one more pick this evening. Maybe
we'll see. Pick 53. Most people who cover the draft believe it was top heavy and the depth really isn't there. So the second round tonight, we'll see what it brings for the Jazz. Of course, if anything drops between now and tonight, we will bring it to you here on the program. Okay, our first guest will be Smitty live in studio. We're going to break down what the Jazz did. We're going to break down some NBA big picture conversation. We'll try to look at the Jazz rotation, figure out who's going to start, figure out who's going to play some minutes with Smitty. But before Smitty rolls into studio on a beautiful Thursday afternoon, courtesy of our good friends and your good friends too at Prize Picks, it's time now for your opening tip.
Welcome to The Drive with Spence Checketts on Utah's #1 sports talk. Now into the studios of ESPN 700 to set the scene for the show. The opening tip of The Drive is brought to you by Prize Picks. Use the code ESPN 700 and run your game with Prize Picks.
Austin Ainge, his first real big situation as the primary decision maker for the Utah Jazz took place last night. And if you read some of the draft recaps, if you listen to some of the post-draft podcasts, most everybody is applauding what the Utah Jazz did last night. So let's dig into it. We've got some other big picture NBA storylines to talk about. Is Joe Dumars rapidly becoming the executive in the NBA that other executives just want to call and float weird trade ideas to, like they used to do with Isaiah Thomas when he was running the New York Knicks? The Pelicans just took an unbelievably calculated risk that could blow up right in their face. A lot of winners last night, in my opinion. A lot of losers last night, in my opinion. The local storyline was Yegor Demon being drafted by the Brooklyn Nets at 8. That was a little high on the range that most people were expecting. And apparently Yegor is going to compete with like 4 other international point guard / wings that Brooklyn selected throughout the course of the night. They had 5 first-round picks. Nobody thought they were going to take all of them, and they did. And 4 of them are like the very same player. So we'll see what Demon's able to do in Brooklyn. But from a Utah Jazz standpoint, I thought Austin Ainge last night showed boldness that this organization clearly needs and, quite frankly, probably has not had for quite some time. I'm not knocking on anyone. Very much like and respect Justin Zanuck and Danny Ainge. But Austin Ainge stepped up, addressed the media after the draft was completed, round 1, answered questions, and I thought outlined his case very well. So Ace Bailey, about 5 or 6 months ago, Ace Bailey was thought to be potentially the second best player in this draft. And honestly, if you go back prior to the way Cooper Flagg just really flew this year, I mean, Cooper Flagg coming up as a high school and then AAU player, Mount Verde Academy, after he transferred from his high school in Maine, was thought to be potentially generationally special, but nobody really knew because Ace Bailey was kind of in that range as well as he made his way through the high school and AAU ranks. At one point, he was thought to be, 6'10", 6'10 and a half as a player that could really do a bunch of different things with measurables that are very intoxicating. The buzz around him started to go the wrong direction after the combine when he measured 6'8" without shoes, which I still think is the dumbest thing. You play basketball wearing shoes. Why are we measuring you without shoes? It makes no sense. And then, of course, the noise around Ace started to, hone in on the fact that he is refusing to work out for teams. And he straight up canceled the workout for the Philadelphia 76ers. Now, I've been a part of individual workouts in pro basketball. I've witnessed hundreds of them. Between tape that you have, certainly these days with these young men, when you start scouting them when they're like 12, 13 years old, Austin Ainge, Danny Ainge, Justin Zanuck, all the talent evaluators for the Utah Jazz have been watching Ace Bailey play basketball for 6 years on a myriad of different levels. And they went to the combine. Austin actually interviewed Ace when he was with the Celtics, and the Jazz sat down with Ace Bailey as well. And at the combine, you get exactly what you need. You have all the medicals. I don't know that the individual workouts are really all that paramount. I'm sure people that run teams would probably disagree with me, but you have the data that you need. I never viewed the fact that he didn't work out for teams as a big red flag. I did view the fact that he straight up canceled and no-showed as maybe a sign that the maturity situation maybe isn't great, and that's kind of the knock on Ace. Thought to be one of the more immature players in this draft. I do want to point out that Omar Cooper, who is Ace Bailey's agent, is brand new at this. Ace is his only client, and the decision-making around the pre-draft stuff with Ace clearly came from his representation. So Omar is with Lifestyle Sports Agency. It is brand new, and Ace is his only client. So he's never done this before. So that's why it's been a little bit clunky, but here's the bottom line, okay? The Jazz simply took the best possible player they could have taken at 5. Now, that sounds reductive and simple, but I'm not sure that Charlotte did. I think Ace Bailey is tremendously talented, so much more so than Con Knippel, who I think will be a solid NBA player. But if these two players reach their potential, and I'll even throw VJ in that, I love VJ Edgecombe, who went to Philly at 3. If Ace Bailey, Con Knippel, and VJ Edgecombe all reach their ceilings, Ace is the best player. Ace has the most talent of those 3. Now, the Jazz could have definitely taken Trey Johnson, who Sam Vecini this morning said he actually thought should be the pick at 5 instead of Ace. But what Austin Ainge did, and this is what you have to do, you cannot make these decisions. If you're a roster constructor in pro basketball, you cannot act out of fear. You can't act out of emotion. And I think we fall into that around here a little bit too much because we have a little PTSD with a lot of the best players we've ever had simply just leaving. The Hayward thing will always be odd. Of course, with Mitchell and D. Will, those were trades, but those were trades that a lot of people believe were essentially forced behind the scenes by the player himself. Gobert was traded, so we have a lot of players. We could go back to Booz, that entire group. Ever since John and Carl retired, we've had very smart roster constructors build some good teams, but they've been broken down far before the meat was off that bone. I mean, I still believe the Donovan and Rudy and Quinn group had plenty left. Now, obviously, it didn't go down, but I do have to wonder, based off of how bold Austin was last night, like, we don't care, Ace, if you don't want to be here. Because the fact of the matter is, if you guys have been following the fallout and the coverage, I listened to 5 post-draft pods this morning in some errands I was doing around town, and I read a bunch last night after I got home. The one narrative that everybody has leaned into is, what are they doing? Ace doesn't want to be in Salt Lake. Well, here's the deal. We get it. A lot of these NBA players will never choose to come here. But what are you supposed to do? Like, not draft anybody or just draft the safest white dude that feels like he'd fit in here? Breaking news, Gordon Hayward was white. When he wasn't playing basketball, he liked to play video games. And they couldn't keep that dude, okay? So you can't just act out of fear. The boldness Austin showed last night, I think, is a really good sign. He said, Ace, we don't care if you don't want to be here. We are drafting you. And now we have a 7-year runway to show you that we have a great dynamite head coach. We have a good program that will help you develop. We have ownership that will pay money and a front office that knows what they're doing. Now, at the end of 7 years, these players earn the right, as they should, to choose to live wherever they want to live. I've always found an odd dynamic in professional sports that these players are legitimately the best at what they do in the world, and we tell them where they live. It is kind of odd if you think about it. So you should have the ability to choose where you do what you do when you're as good at it as these players are. But for a roster construction project, for a team that's in Salt Lake City, you just have to be bold. And I thought Austin was last night. We'll get to the Walter Clayton Jr. thing in just a minute. But we'll catch a break. We're going to do more on this. Coming up on the other side is Richard Smith, live in studio on a beautiful Thursday afternoon. He is back in studio, and he will be back in studio in about 3.5 hours from now. Richard Smitty Smith, thank goodness that you know how to actually do real work instead of pretending like this is actual swinging the pick in the salt mine. How you feeling today?
No, you just said that. It just made me think of What About Bob? You remember What About Bob?
Yeah, sure. Baby
remember,
steps.
Yeah, you remember the scene when Richard Dreyfuss is going, you think he's gone?
He's never gone.
And he opens the door and Bill Murray's
That is such a good movie. I'm glad you brought that up. I have a flight tonight. I might watch What About Bob on my flight tonight. Now I just want to talk about the best Bill Murray movies of all time, but we will not do that. So how you feeling today? You feeling good?
Yeah, we're doing good, Spence. Hey, this is this time of year, for whatever it is, I guess my body, my brain, whatever, is in a certain flow and a certain mindset, because for years and years and years this is the week that we would be in the office at 7 a.m. and leave at midnight every day, and I think I mentioned a couple weeks ago I was sitting at home recently and reading in the early evenings, and man, it's bright out, the sun's out, and then I realized, oh, yeah, it's late spring, early summer, and I usually never saw the sun because we're always hiding in the theater at the Jazz practice facility watching film 12 hours a day, leading up to the draft. So, but this time of year, you just kind of get energized for all the stuff that's going on and all the decisions that are made, some of them that are calculated and some of them are on the fly. And that's what makes it an exciting time.
So we'll start with the Jazz, and then we'll pan back. Although now in my mind, all I'm thinking about is the dinner scene from What About Bob when Bill Murray asked for a salt substitute. I see salt. Is there a salt substitute? And he just won't stop making noise how good the chicken is.
Oh, Mrs.
So good, man. So good. But we will move on. I'm just a big Bill Murray guy. All right. So, Smitty, one of the things I like about having you in studio is you have this front office perspective, and you can help us understand whether or not it means anything that everybody seems to be applauding what the Jazz did last night. Now, Ace Bailey is 18 years old, and so he has a marathon between now and whatever it looks like when he is fully baked. But let's start with Ace, and then we'll get to Walter Clayton Jr., and then we'll do maybe what's next for the Jazz. We talked about it last night, but for our listeners who may have missed it, at one point during this calendar year, and I looked this up prior to the draft, Ace was thought to be maybe the second best player on the board. Now, his teammate Dylan Harper separated himself. So Cooper goes 1, Dylan goes 2. Then VJ at 3 to Philly, and then Con Knipple 4 to Charlotte, and Ace Bailey is there at 5 for the Jazz to select. And all of the reports, Smitty, are literally all of them. If you go and read anything from The Athletic or ESPN, if you go listen to any of these post-draft pods, they're all saying the same thing. What are they doing? He doesn't want to be there. But Austin Ainge said, I don't give a rip. We think he's the best player at 5. We're taking him at 5. What do you think?
Yeah, well, what happens, Spence, is all that stuff is just stuff of the moment that ends up getting swept away, and like the waves on the beach, it just goes away, and then you move on. And the kid will come out here, he'll get acclimated, they'll love him up. They'll make sure that he's comfortable and that he's feeling wanted and secure and all that, which you should. That's the kind of stuff you want to do when you have an 18 or 19-year-old who is reacclimating to a new part, next part of their life and a new part of the country that they're not familiar with. He's a young kid. He's an exciting type player. What's going to be interesting is how he comes into the fold of what they're trying to do and what his mindset is. One of the things I like about him is that he really has a versatile game and he can really do a lot of different things. He's a switchable guy defensively. He can create shots on the offense. He's the kind of player the Jazz need on their roster, meaning his length, his agility, his athleticism. All those things fit right into the box that they need to fill. The one thing I've heard about him is that he's a pretty good team guy, and he's pretty good with his teammates and the coaches that were at Rutgers, which is a positive, because the stuff I've seen outside of that in interviews and whatnot, and the way he carried himself, like last night, during the draft and stuff, to me, I got a different vibe off that. It kind of felt like he was, feeling a little bit of his oats. Maybe he thought he was bigger than the program. Just his overall mindset. And one of the questions I would have going into it, of course, I'm sure the Jazz looked into all these things and, dotted the I's and crossed the T's on all this kind of stuff. But, I hope he's a team-oriented guy, and he wants to do what he can do to help the group to succeed. If he comes in and he's trying to be, a major guy right off the bat and wants to be all rookie and wants to be, make the all-star team and all these things or whatever, and he's more worried about his own game and what he produces on the floor for himself, then that would be a concern that I would have in terms of having him as part of what the group is trying to accomplish. But I'm sure the Jazz front office group, looked at all those things and they researched them and feel comfortable that he was the guy that they wanted to incorporate into what they're trying to build.
So one of the many roles you filled over there, and you've told so many stories about going to pick up Rudy, going to pick up Hayward, going to pick up Donovan from the airport, and then so let's talk logistics for our listeners that would like a peek behind the curtain. What comes next for Ace? Does he fly into Salt Lake? Who goes and gets him? Or what does that look like? Are they looking at apartments? Do they take him to the ZBBC and say? So what's next in the process, Smitty?
Yeah, they'll try and get him in town, whether it's today or tomorrow. They'll have a look. Sometimes in the past, I don't know if they still do it or not. We used to have a little meet and greet thing over at the Grand America for season ticket holders.
Oh, cool.
So they could come over and say hi and meet the new player that we had drafted and that kind of thing and have them say a few words to the group. I remember one year I probably shouldn't tell this.
No, story time. We're there, Smitty. You took us there.
Oh, man.
You took us there.
I remember one time, the year we drafted Costa Kufis from Ohio State. It was a similar scenario. Costa did not come in to work out. We did not interview him. We thought he was going to go before us in the draft. Okay. He only played 1 year at Ohio State, and he fell to us. And we were we had him on our board, but we really didn't expect him to be there. So we were in that mindset. Anyway, we end up taking him because we think he's the best player at the time. He comes in, we do this little meet and greet thing. We have him on stage, and we have a few questions. And he's of Greek heritage. His mother was a middle school principal in the Dayton, Ohio area, and that's where he grew up. Mm-hmm. But Costa is very Greek looking.
Yes, he is.
Like he looks like he just came over from Athens or something, right? And we had a season ticket holder, an older gentleman, might have been in his 80s or something. He was excited to come and be part of this thing. And we said, are there any questions? And a question over here, a question over there. Then this gentleman raises his hand and said, yes, sir, you have a question for Costa. He goes, yes. How did you learn to speak such good English?
Oh, dear.
And he goes, such good English. He goes, yes, I'm very fascinated with your Greek heritage and that you speak such clear English. And he was kind of dumbfounded, obviously. And the gentleman, of course, didn't know of his background. He grew up in Ohio, and so Costa kind of did as much as he could to smooth it over to say, well, I went to good schools and my mom is an educator and in the middle school in Ohio, and I went to a very good high school and a year at Ohio State, and so I think that's part of my overall. He's trying to think of a way. How do I say this? Guy that I'm as much of an American as you are. And so that was funny, But we've had a lot of interactions like that over the years where players come in and they try and meet the season ticket holder base or maybe the VIP group or something like that. I don't know what the Jazz have planned in that regard, with these new guys or if they're doing anything in that way. But they'll certainly get them quickly acclimated the next 3, 4, 5 days because they'll have them in here by the middle of next week, getting their group ready for Summer League because the Jazz do their summer league here that this year is going to be up in the Huntsman Center because of the renovations at the Delta Center. So the Jazz Summer League is going to be at the Huntsman Center the week of right after July 4th.
Yeah, next weekend. Yeah.
Is it so? So they're doing it then, and then right from there, they always go right down to Vegas and do the Vegas Summer League. So those guys will be getting in 5, 6, 7 games within like a 10-day span.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so and there's always variance and how much guys play in the games, or and when they decide they're going to hold them out, or they're going to play them on Tuesday and not on Wednesday, or they're only going to play them 10 minutes today and 20 minutes tomorrow, and all that stuff. It gets, you know, a little goofy in my opinion, because they just try to overwork it and overthink the process. But those guys will be in here very quickly in the next several days, and they'll be getting acclimated to the group. And Bart Taylor and his group and the personnel side will be finalizing the people that they want to bring in for the summer league team. They'll have some of the guys from the team last year that will play in the summer league, and then depending on how the draft goes tonight, if they do anything else different, they'll be on the phones as soon as the draft ends tonight. They'll be on the phones with agents of guys who didn't get drafted to say, hey, we like your guy, and we really thought about taking him at 53, which the Jazz have tonight. We didn't take him at 53, but we really like him enough to want to bring him into Summer League and take a close-up look at him. Can we get him in here? And then that's a negotiation thing with the agents. And so the agent says, well, I got the Lakers want him, and Phoenix wants him, and so let me see, you know, whatever. And so Bart Taylor and his group are on the phone with agents, just going down their list, boom, 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 the players they want to try and get in for the Summer League program. And sometimes they get a guy for Vegas, but they don't get a guy for Salt Lake, or vice versa. They say, hey, why don't you give him to us for the Salt Lake games, and then have him go play for the Lakers in the Vegas games, okay? And the agent will go, yeah, okay, we can do that, you know. So there's a lot of, you know, jockeying around and stuff, and because it's really not obviously about the games themselves in the two summer leagues. It's about getting a chance to see those players on the floor against like competition, to be able to see how they do and how they fare against that, and then you make those kind of judgments, and then you go from there in terms of possibly inviting non-drafted guys into your camp in the fall, or even into other workouts later in the summer, open gym type things, where you can get more bites at the apple, so to speak, about trying to fill in some holes on your roster.
So before we move over to Walter Clayton Jr., the second selection the Jazz made, and they gave up, what they gave up was not nothing. We'll get to that in a moment. So the dynamic of the reports that Ace and his reps were trying to make sure he landed somewhere back east, the two teams were Washington and Brooklyn that are reported as where he wanted to land. And just Austin saying, I don't care, you know, we're drafting you because we think you're the best player. So they've got 7 years, right, Smitty? They've got 7 years where they can say, okay, look, we know that this wasn't your preferred destination, but we think you were the best player available. We think you fit in here. You're going to get to know our head coach, who we like a lot. You're going to get to know our developmental program. You're going to get to know the community. You're going to get to know the organization. What is that mindset where, okay, we have 7 years to sell you on us? You know, if the reports are true that this kid does not want to be here, and Austin just bucked that and said we're doing it anyway, what's the mindset?
Well, that's a very good question, Spence, because I don't know what the regime now, you know, the Ryan Smith and his ownership group, and then the Angels that are in the front office now, and I know Danny. I don't know Danny very well, but I know how he operates a little bit, and it's kind of somewhat similar to I think how Jerry Sloan would operate all those years, and that is, hey, we drafted you, you know, we are not going to kiss your, you know what, you know, this is a job, this is a profession, so you know, you come in and let's go. We're going to work. I don't care. You don't want to be, you know. You want to be here. You don't want to be here. It doesn't matter. You want to play in the NBA. It's the same as if you're in some other corporation, Spence. You go to Harvard MBA school, and you come out and you accept a job with You know, I don't know, Bain and Company. You know, your dad was with them a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but that's a big firm. He could be working in Boston, or they could say, hey, we want you to work in the Chicago office now for the next 2 years, or we want you to work in the LA office, or whatever it is. So the NBA is a big corporation, and when you come into this company and you want to work for this company, then you work where the company asks you to go to work. Okay, it's a simple process. You know, you don't want to do that, you can go play in Europe. You can go play in Australia. We have no holds on you, you know, but if you want to play in the NBA, we're assigning you to the Salt Lake office.
This is the process.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's as simple as that. You know, again, with Jerry Sloan, with Kevin O'Connor, with Dennis Lindsay, you know, these are all guys who, you know, are straight up guys who would just say, hey, we're all here to get the job done the best we can. You know, we don't have time for this kind of, you know, nonsense, whether a guy's feelings are hurt today or, you know, or you know, whatever it is. So that's one thing that I would caution against, you know, whatever is the sentiment at the moment. And, of course, this is not even 24 hours after the draft has taken place. And some of this may be misread as well. I don't know. These are all things we hear third and fourth hand, so I don't know how to put any weight on any of this kind of stuff. I would just take it one day at a time to see how the kid is when he comes in and whatnot, you know. But if you know, if he's coming in with the right attitude and the right approach, this is great. Let's go to work. You know, we can get a lot of stuff done. And if there's a problem in that regard, then my impression, and again, don't know him very well, but you know, Will Hardy and Danny Ainge, I know really well in that regard, you know, are the kind of guys that sit a guy down and go, hey, this is what the deal is, okay? Let's go. You know, we don't have time for this, that kind of thing. It's a job. And in the NBA, the way the CBA is, if you draft a guy and you like him and he's your guy, you really think he can do something and you can develop him into something, the Jazz, in this case, would have control over the player for a minimum of 7 years based on his 4-year rookie deal and then a restricted free agent process after that. If you're having problems with the player along the way, he's not working out the way you want, you know, he's too much work, you know, it's, you know, yeah, he's got talent, but his attitude is way over here and we can't seem to get it in line, and, you know, it's too much heavy lifting. Then there are things you can do in terms, obviously, in terms of trades, or even, you know, letting guys go if you just want to cut your losses and move on. You know, I mean, so there's all those things at play. I'm sure that Austin Ainge, in making this decision, made the decision based on the player he thought had the best talent, could add the most to the Jazz group, and also I'm sure that he had looked into all the things in his background about what kind of guy he is, how he was at Rutgers, how the coaches liked him, you know, what the trainers thought of behind the scenes, working with him every day, all those kinds of things. And I don't think he would, you know, throw a lot of his early weight, if you will, in being new on the job to selecting a guy who he thought really, you know, was going to be wishy-washy in terms of, is this going to work out or not? I really think that he would have made the decision unless he's pretty confident that, you know, we can make this work.
Since you brought up Rutgers, let me ask you a question here. So the Big Ten was a good, not great basketball conference last year. You know, the SEC was probably the class, then it was the Big 12, then we get into the ACC, whatever. Michigan State, Maryland, Michigan, Wisconsin, Purdue, all top 15 teams. But Rutgers was 8-12 in conference play. They were 15-17 overall. They lost to Kennesaw State with two of the top, really three prospects at the time, and ended up two of the top 5 NBA prospects on their roster at a time. How do you explain that? And is that anything that's concerning as you go through your process?
It definitely is, because you got two guys who were projected when they came into Rutgers of being two of the top 5 picks. As it turned out, they were in the next NBA draft. And you would think that team, with the very good coach that they have there, is going to be able to do very well in the Big Ten. and they didn't have a winning record.
Mm-hmm.
And their performances were uneven. Both Harper and Bailey, played well enough that, obviously the teams still regarded them very highly in terms of potential pro prospects. But they weren't consistent all year long. They didn't play in some of the games that you think they should have not an easy time, but should win this game against an inferior opponent, and they had sometimes lackluster performances, maybe because their head wasn't in it that night, or they thought this is going to be whatever. But that plays into what kind of mentality they have. What do they bring to the court every night?
Mm-hmm.
Do they come to just play at the times when they want to play, and when they don't, they just kind of shrug it off. Yeah, it doesn't matter. I'm out of here after a year anyway. Those are things you don't really know, but guys behind the scenes would have a feel for that. So that's why when you're doing all your homework and background, you're not just talking to the coaches, because a lot of times the coaches are going to sell you a bill of goods unless you have a personal relationship with them. If it's just a professional one where they know who you are, but you don't really know each other on a personal level, they're going to try and sell you on a kid because they're trying to improve their program, right? So the guy from Rutgers today is calling prospects, that he's recruiting, saying, "Hey, you see, you come to Rutgers and you can be one of the top 5 picks in the draft," that kind of thing. Who you try and talk to are the people behind the scenes, the athletic trainers, maybe the student managers who work there, who are the same age as the players, who might be in the class with the players, who can tell you, "Hey, this is how this guy is when he's not in the limelight, when the spotlight isn't on him." You try and talk to opposing coaches who more than likely had recruited those kids, who now are playing against them, but also have a different perspective on who they are, not just as players, but also as people, because they may have been, spending a few years trying to recruit them as well. So you try and get a hold of those people to see, hey, what's the real deal with this kid, and stuff. And a lot of times you get a lot more on the spot answers when you can get to people like that. I know sometimes we went so far as to having some of our staff spend 2 or 3 days on a college campus, investigating, looking at certain players, and going around to everybody they could figure out, who that player would have interacted with on a regular basis. Was it the resident advisor who lived on their dorm floor with them? Was it the residence hall manager or the director who ran the place? Whether it was people who were in the advising department, someone who was one of their teachers, anybody like that could give you a feel for who they were away from the limelight. And those things really carry, at least with us, they used to carry a lot of weight, because that told you what the person was really like when they were out of the limelight of playing basketball.
Odds for Rookie of the Year winner: Cooper Flagg 1, Trey Johnson 2, Ace Bailey 3. So there you go. We'll catch a quick break. And coming up next, Ace Bailey not the only player selected by the Jazz last night. They moved up to take Walter Clayton Jr., who has simply won everywhere he's been. Will he win in the NBA? Only time will tell. Start your engines. ESPN 700 is excited to announce the first ever Monster Jam World Finals coming to Utah July 4th and the 5th. Listen to ESPN 700 for your chance to win tickets, or visit Ticketmaster.com now before they're gone. More with Smitty live in studio coming up next. Stay tuned for coverage of round 2 of the NBA draft, where myself and Richard Smith will break down several players who you've never heard of before and most of whom will never play in the NBA. That comes your way in just a little bit, but Smitty is in studio in the meantime. All right, talk Dace Bailey last segment, the newest member of the Utah Jazz, number 5 pick overall out of Rutgers. Let's move over to what they elected to do to move up 3 spots. They exchanged 21 for 18. And in addition, they sent 43 tonight and then 2 other second-round picks to just move up 3 spots. So that's not nothing. That feels like a lot to move up 3 spots. However, as you said last night, if you think that's the guy, if you think you've got the guy, go get the guy, right?
Yeah, and that's what you really have to do, Spence. And that's one of the reasons why the Jazz have been in this so-called asset accumulation mode the last couple of years, getting all these draft picks. It's just like having money in the bank, and you have it for a rainy day, for when you have an accident or something happens, and you need extra money on the spot to get out of a hole or whatever. This is why you have these assets. And so I'm going to make the assumption, and I don't know because I'm not in the room, but they had targeted Walter Clayton as a guy they really liked, that they thought might get to them at 21. What you do when you're waiting on your pick, when the picks are starting to unfold and you're getting to 14, 15, 16, you're making phone calls to the teams either in front of you or the guys you know around the league that are locked in on what's happening on the spot to see, hey, who are the guys in front of us going to take? Who are they going to, now it may be someone you're very good friends with. It may be a guy that you're really good friends with on another team, and you can call and say, hey, dude, who you guys taking? And we're going to take the Jones kid. Okay, thanks. And then you're jockeying around behind the scenes trying to get all your ducks lined up. They may have made those calls and in the process found out that one of the teams in front of them at 19 or 20 had an interest in Clayton or were going to take him. And so they probably, and again, this is just an assumption or a guess on my part, that they got to that information and they said, we like Clayton enough, we got to jump over a couple teams to get to him. Otherwise, he's not going to get to us. And so they made a couple of quick phone calls, and they got to Washington was it Washington?
Washington,
yeah,
yes.
At 18, and said, hey, are you interested in trading back, flipping 18 and 21? And yeah, maybe. Yeah, what do you got? Well, we'll get. How about we throw in 43? That's not enough, or whatever. Okay, what do you think? And that goes back and forth, and that sometimes is literally a 30 or 40-second conversation. How about throwing Markin in? We'll take Markin in, and yeah, we're not doing that. Okay, all right. What about a second-round pick next year or whatever? And they quickly come up with something that both sides agree to, and they say, okay, we good? Yeah, we're good. Okay, we'll do that. And the Jazz, I think, were in some kind of measure of that regard where they said, we need to get from 21 to 18 because one of those teams, 19 or 20, either Brooklyn or Miami might take him, and that would be my guess. And so they probably looked at it and said, we gotta get above those guys because one of those teams we've heard or we understand like him, and he's not going to get to us. Okay, and so that's why you do that deal. And if you like the kid enough and you think he's a guy that you really want to bring into your group and you think it's worth it, that's why you have that stuff in the bank that's literally, 5 years from now, 6 years from now. That's why you have it, because we don't even know if we're going to be here 5 or 6 years from now. We don't care. That's why we have it. If we can use that as enticement to get a deal done now for something that we're sold on, then that's what we're going to do. And I believe there was some version of that caused that move to be made.
So the reports were Miami was ready to take Walter Clayton Jr. Okay. Those were the reports. I think that was an Athletic report that I saw late night. Obviously, I can't corroborate that. I texted Pat Riley. He didn't get back to me. So the reports are the Jazz were at 21. They very much wanted Walter Clayton Jr., and they heard that Miami was going to take him at 20. Miami settled on the Yakachonis kid, who was one of the top 12 prospects according to most mock drafts and big boards, so they probably did pretty well at 20. Brad Stevens was asked about Austin drafting Walter Clayton Jr., and he said, I could have told you 2 years ago Austin was going to trade up to draft Walter Clayton Jr. Apparently, Austin has liked him for a long, long time.
Okay, well, see, there you go. And if you're in a situation and you look at that draft board and you look at all the possibilities and you're trying to figure out if we can get to a certain guy that we like and where we're drafting. And, look, we had the same thing with, almost a decade ago with Donovan Mitchell. And Dennis Lindsay really liked him and really, was really, hung up on trying to get him. And we were picking 24. And we had surmised and figured out, well, he's not going to get past 15, 16, 17. So we have to get above 15 somehow. And Dennis went to work, and we were working the phones, and finally got able to do the trade on the spot at the moment, with Tim Connelly and the Denver Nuggets at that time. Again, all those things, might happen a whole bunch differently, Spence, if just somebody makes a move in front of you that's different than what you expect. For example, Tim Connelly was hoping for Denver to get a certain player at 13. That player went at 10, so he wasn't able to get the player he wanted. So now he was willing to try and go to plan B, because the guy he was interested in was no longer available. Mm-hmm. Okay? He liked Donovan Mitchell. He didn't think he was quite worth that. Okay, that's how everybody does their own evaluations. Dennis gets him on the phone. Hey, what do you think? He goes, well, we're waiting to see if our guy is still there. Okay, can I put you on hold? Yeah, okay, and we're literally on hold for several minutes and then get back. What do you think? He goes, yeah, our guy just went. Okay. Yeah, what are you thinking? And boom, boom, boom. And a deal like that is literally done in less than a minute, like on the phone. How about this? How about that? And they finally agreed on something to flip-flop picks and also throw in Trey Lyles, who the Jazz had drafted the year before. And Denver liked him some. And we liked him some. We still thought he could develop into a decent rotational piece. But Dennis liked Donovan Mitchell enough that he thought that was worth, the gamble. And Quinn Snyder also was in on that at that precise moment, giving literally the thumbs up from across the table that let's do that, And so that's how Donovan Mitchell. Otherwise, Donovan Mitchell goes to, I don't know, Toronto or Indiana or whatever, a few picks later, and and history is rewritten. But that's sometimes how those things come together and how quickly they can work in your favor, or they can fall apart and not occur because you don't get a trade done with Washington because they change their mind or you're not offering them enough. So they say, no, we're just gonna roll with what we got, and then they get to number 20, and what you're saying, Miami takes Walter Clayton. By one guy, son of a. Now the Jazz have to go with another guy. So, however that would roll, we had that a lot of years ago. Who it was? Who it involved? It was a second-round pick, and it was 42, 43, 44, something like that. And we had zeroed in on Pat Connaughton.
Oh, okay.
And
turned out to be a nice player. Yeah.
Pat Connaughton went the pick before us to Portland. And we did the old, fist on the table slam. We just
right there, yeah.
And stuff. So those things, sometimes can happen for you, and sometimes they work against you, and that's why you have those boards in place, and that's why you have all your contingencies lined up ahead of time, so you can just read and react like you have to in the game of basketball and in football, whatever, see what's going on and then do something different on the spot in order to make something work. And that's a lot of times what happens during the course of a draft.
So let's bottom line this. I do want to do some conversation concerning what the rotation could potentially look like, but let's go back to Ace for a moment, Ace Bailey. I know you don't love comps. I don't really love comps either. The comps that are flying around about Ace are you hear Michael Porter Jr., you hear Rashard Lewis, top end, a player like a Tracy McGrady, a wing that can really and look, he's a Hall of Famer, so that's why I don't love the comparison game. But just for our listeners' frame of reference, Smitty, as you've kind of dug in on the tape and you've got to know Ace Bailey, let's assume full development and he reaches his potential. What does that look like in the NBA?
Well, he has a chance to be a very dynamic player on both ends of the floor if his head is right. If he comes in and he has that good attitude and he wants to be a better player, if he doesn't have the attitude that I'm already there, and okay, let's go, give me the ball. If he's willing to learn, if he's willing to work at it, he has the physical tools and the ability to really impact the game on both ends of the floor. And so that's his upside. That's what would be the best case scenario for him, is if he brings those things and brings that attitude. The guys you mentioned, by the way, all those guys, Porter and
Rashard
Lewis and Tracy McGrady. First of all, they're all bigger than this kid.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody had this kid at Rutgers at 6'10", and they found out at the NBA pre-draft camp, they measured him. Oh, he's 6'7.5".
Just real quick before you continue, why are we measuring these prospects without shoes?
I don't know.
You play basketball wearing shoes. It's the dumbest thing every year. I'm like, oh, he's 6'5" without shoes. I'm like, okay, yeah. Are we playing barefoot in Africa? I believe they wear basketball shoes when they play. Anyway, as you were.
We said that. We said that for years, Spence. We would argue that with the NBA people. And, the argument always came back was, well, different guys have different types of shoes, and some guys have bigger soles, and some guys, have them wear the shoes they wear, or have them all wear the same shoe. Why don't you guys get a deal with Nike and have everybody measured, and you could even promote it. Ace Bailey is 6'8.5" in Nike Air Zoom 2s.
Mm-hmm.
Or
love
whatever.
it. Yeah.
I mean, but I don't know why they do it. It's the dumbest thing. It's close to this thing we mentioned yesterday about why they don't make the trades official at the moment teams agree to them, and they say, oh, Utah's taking this guy, but then he's going to trade him later or whatever.
And you got to wear a Wizards hat on stage when you're actually with the Jazz. It's so dumb.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So what that is, I don't know. But Bailey is shorter than people thought. So he's going to play in shoes. He's going to play basically at 6'9". Okay. He's got a good wingspan. He's going to if he can play very well defensively because he's a switchable guy. He's got very good agility and very good athleticism, so he can move. So he's going to be one of those Jaden McDaniel type guys. He can play very well on both ends of the floor. The downside of him, if he doesn't reach that area, is going to be that his shooting doesn't get consistent enough. Everybody says he's a very good shooter. What he was at Rutgers really was more of a streak shooter.
Yes, he was.
So he had games where he either didn't shoot it well or didn't shoot enough. He's not a consistent shooter. But when he's in a rhythm and he's in a flow and stuff like that, he can get his shot off because he has good mechanics and he's long, so he can shoot over people. His efficiency was not that great. His decision making sometimes was questionable. He's had sometimes he also was very suspect in his ball handling in tight spaces.
Little loose. Yeah.
And so that presented problems at times. And so, but hey, we take a step back. He's 18. He's got some skills. He's got some natural basketball instincts that are very good. that are good groundwork and foundation to work off of. Now the coaches get him. They get him in the gym. They start working with him. They see what his aptitude and his appetite is for working hard and trying to develop the weaknesses in his game, and that will tell us a lot about what kind of player he has a chance to become.
Let's move over to Walter Clayton Jr. now, who simply has won everywhere he's been and has improved every year he's been in college. So back-to-back state championships in high school. When he played for Rick Pitino at Iona, they won the MAC Conference. Walter won MAC Player of the Year. He then transfers to go play for Todd Golden at the University of Florida, where they win the national championship. And Walter Clayton Jr. is your Final Four most outstanding player. There's a little Jamal Murray-ish there with his shot making. I mean, I was watching some stuff last night and this morning. I like watching him play. He's smooth. He's like a fun player to watch. He's got great handles. 6'2", 22 years old. The data indicates players that are drafted in that range, that are that age, don't necessarily stick. I mean, it's a really wild exercise when you just go look at number 18 picks in history, or how many top 10 picks are even on the team that drafted them from 5 years ago. Like, we do this thing where Austin Ainge cracks a mic and says, this is our dream scenario. We got the two names we wanted. 2 weeks ago, we identified these two names. We walked away with it. And it's kind of like, dude, it's like the college football coach on National Signing Day that says, we got everyone we wanted. And it's like, you're the 67th ranked class. No, you didn't. But you're just saying it to appease the fans or what have you. So as you've dug in, you've watched him over the years, I'll ask you the same question. Fully developed as a pro, what does it look like for Walter Clayton Jr.?
Well, I think he's a very solid player, but I think he's the kind of guy who I like the way his game flows, because he doesn't get too high, too low during games. He just kind of plays on an even keel. Mm-hmm. He's a very good shot maker. He never seems to be out of control. They never seem to be able to rush him and get him sped up. He seems to have control of himself, of his game. I don't know how much more he has in the tank in terms of improvement. Okay, what he brings to the table right now is probably enough to get him by. But again, at 6'2", he's another shorter, should say, backcourt guy to add to the group that the Jazz have, whether it's Keontae George at 6'3", or Colin Sexton at 6'2", 6'3", or Jordan Clarkson at 6'4". They have a lot of smallish type guards that are in their group, and I just think that they need to somehow, in some regard, get bigger guys in the backcourt that can help in terms of stopping the ball early, because that's been one of their issues as a defensive team. They have a very poor defensive team the last couple of years by all metrics, and two of the things they could never do is guard the three-point shot because of their lack of length on the perimeter, and also their transition defense was horrible, and so they couldn't stop anybody when people would be throwing the ball up over the midcourt line. They couldn't stop them from getting on top of the rim. So you have to have athletic guys, but you have to have length. That's the kind of thing, for example, brings into mind a guy like Ace Bailey. If he's on the floor and he's one of those guys, he's a guy who can use his length, his athleticism, his agility, his quickness to be able to get in front and stop balls in transition. That's what you want to like. They must like Clayton in terms of his overall ability to be a winner, to bring a solid playmaker on the floor, someone who plays within himself, someone who makes the right plays most of the time. Because again, they use the first-round pick on a 6'2" guard who's not overly athletic or a dynamic shooter, or has some skill that's just off the charts, So they must really like something, that they think can help their group in terms of being successful, because that just adds another short backcourt guy to the group they already have.
Your point's well taken, and we'll see how this plays out. And this is the last thing, then I'll set you loose so you can go watch some Ryan Kalkbrenner tape for us round 2 tonight, and maybe catch a little nap before another late night on air. So last thing, Smitty, when it comes to Ace and when it comes to Walter Clayton Jr., how do you think rotationally this is going to look? I mean, I do feel like there's, and Gordy, when I asked him this last night, pushed back and said no. I feel like there's a world where Walter Clayton Jr. could take the starting point guard job just because I'm not sold on Keontae or Isaiah. And I wonder what they do with Colin Sexton. There are reports that Dallas is maybe inquiring to have Colin kind of keep the ship afloat while Kyrie's hurt. We'll have to see what happens. And, when it comes to Ace Bailey at the age of 18 years old, does he start over if they bring John Collins back, who played well for them last year? Does he start over John? I mean, coaches like vets. They don't like rookies. So last thing for this hit, rotationally, what do you expect to see next year from both these two young rookies?
Well, I think the way that it's going to depend on how the Jazz form their roster between now and October, because I think there's going to be potential for a lot of changes. You've got to, to use the off-quoted phrase, there's a new sheriff in town, okay? Austin Ainge is making the decisions now. So does he believe in some of the guys in this group, or a lot of guys he wants to move on from, whatever that is? Obviously, those aren't unilateral decisions. A lot of people weigh in on those kind of things, but he's the ultimate decision maker. He's going to look at that, and he's been looking at it from afar, through the eyes of his dad, who's been here a few years now, and then he comes in, and now he's part of it. So he has kind of a unique perspective in a couple of ways in that regard. And so he's gonna reshape the roster, and there's nothing that's off limits because, again, Spence, as we've said before, they had the worst record in the league. They were, by most metrics, the worst defensive team in the league. They can score okay. But they have to. There's a lot of holes they have to fill, and so how these two rookies will fit into that, I think, will be determined by who else they bring in on the roster, who they shuffle out, who else they bring in, either through trades or through free agent signings in the summer, whatever they decide to do to remake the roster, and then in October, we'll have a better feel for what the roster looks like, and then what these two guys, what their roles would be. But I would assume Bailey would have as a number 5 pick and a guy, the type of player they need badly on their roster, that he would have every opportunity to come in and get major minutes right away, at that 3 spot. And then this kid Clayton, may be a rotational guy coming off the bench, but it also depends who else is still there. It depends on any kinds of strides that the Isaiah Collier kid takes during the summertime as a point guard, what Keontae George has done during the summer to improve him, if either one of those guys is still on the roster come October. But Clayton will also have an opportunity at some point to show, how he can stabilize an offense and how he can contribute to, some kind of sustainable performance and improvement going forward.
All right, Smitty, head home, get a nap, grind on some second-round tape, and we will see you in just a few hours for round 2, baby.
I feel bad leaving you here. You're just grinding away in the desert.
Right. People think they want to do this job. It's masonry. I'm swinging the pick in the salt mine, Smitty.
I know it. I can see all the scars on you.
I know, man. All right, we'll see you in a few hours, okay?
Man.
All right, Richard Smith, who was along for the ride last night, and we'll do round 2 tonight. Stay tuned. Coming up on the other side, we will switch gears. We'll do a little soccer with Pablo Mastroeni, so keep it right here. Utah Mammoth made a trade yesterday in the midst of all the NBA offseason drama and NBA draft. Neil Smith, former general manager of the New York Rangers, will join us to break that trade down. We'll do a little sports court. Don't forget, round 2 of the NBA draft is tonight, and we must be glutton for punishment because we will cover it like we did in round 1, starting at 6 o'clock when we say goodnight. But RSL back in action against an old rival coming up, and some fun storylines surrounding this little old soccer club. The head coach, Pablo Mastroeni, on a Thursday. Pobs, happy Thursday, man. How we doing?
Happy Thursday, Spence. Doing great, bud.
Appreciate the time. So let's not bury the lead. Diego Luna, a all-star once again. Back-to-back all-star selections for Diego. That has not happened for RSL since Nick Raimondo and Kyle Beckerman over a decade ago. So we have a lot to talk about that does not involve all-star selections and such, but a nice nod for Diego. Pablo, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's awesome for both Diego and the club. You know, I think as we've spoken about, you know, I think the Millers want to really build a fantastic team that can be a perennial playoff team, and I think in order to do so, you have to have players that are consistently playing at a really high level. I think Diego's a great example. And so I think it's a great step for the club and Diego to continue to, you know, mature into a well-rounded player, a player that's playing at a really high level with the national team, and someone that hopefully will be around for many years to come.
What was your reaction when you had found out that you were selected to the All-Star team for the first time? I feel like that's kind of a nice little box check, the dream that most young players have.
Yeah, especially, you know, obviously not prevalent in Europe, all-star teams, but I think growing up even if you just play soccer as I did, you're aware of, you know, the NBA All-Star game, the baseball All-Star game, and the NFL pro game, or, you know, I think it's just a great recognition. And I think in today's MLS, it's a lot different than back in the day, where there's so many stars in our league. And so to be a player like Diego, who's now in his third year of MLS, and you know, to be recognized, it's pretty powerful, and it's definitely a boost of confidence. You know, and you can also add the national team to his resume and all these things. It's pretty impactful, and it's, I think, an indicator that you're moving in the right direction, and a great experience as well. You know, because you get to meet all these guys, obviously Messi and all the other guys that will be there, and it's almost like a fraternity of sorts for 4 days or 3 days. You know, and you get to mingle and share experiences and get to know the guys that are across the field from you. Some of the guys that you compete against week in and week out, but some of the guys that you grew up, you know, idolizing and really shaping your game around these players. So it's going to be, it's really a wonderful few days to be recognized and to spend with the other guys.
You know, I always talk about this. I don't think, well, I know I don't, and I'm quite sure most of our domestic sports fans don't fully understand the magnitude of who Lionel Messi is in the ecosystem simply of the sport of soccer. I mean, he's Michael Jordan, he's Tiger Woods, he's whatever name you want to throw attached to the sport that most people believe is the greatest to ever do it. I know there's a debate there. I'm not educated enough to have a take, but I don't even know, like, what the question is. What do you think it's going to be like for, and I know this has already happened, but when you take the field, when you take the pitch and you look over and literally the greatest to ever do it is standing there, what sort of osmosis or whatever the hell it is can be ascertained from just that experience of playing with, training, and playing in a game along with the greatest that's ever done it?
Yeah, obviously, it's almost surreal, right? I think it's an out-of-body experience. You know, I had the opportunity to play alongside David Beckham in an all-star game. And even in that moment, it was like I was in a different planet, and I was just soaking it all up and asking him questions about his career. And you know, it's like one of your heroes is right there next to you. And it's one of these moments that it's like you never thought it was possible. Because you can imagine when Diego was growing up, Messi was in his heyday. You know, and so then, and they have a lot of similarities in their game, you know, and so I'm sure that he modeled a lot of what he does from what he saw with Messi on the screen, and then to share a locker room and a field, and the opportunity to compete in a game together. I mean, it's unworldly. it's a magnificent opportunity. It's hard to kind of put into words, but I think I found myself thinking, I can't believe I'm in the same room with these guys. Like it's surreal.
Yeah, I can remember when we had Beckham here, and initially he came here with Real Madrid, and that was Los Galacticos, and they had Ruud van Nistelrooy, and you could keep Kaká. I mean, Iker Casillas. We could keep Roberto Carlos. Like, I remember when that group walked into the hotel, we were waiting for them to get off the bus, and they're such like a holy bleep, like they're actually here. And,
right.
Beckham's whole thing is like his celebrity ultimately, like he was a very good player. I'm not trying to say that he wasn't. He was a very good player for club and country and in England. But I feel like Messi is that times 10, like, again, I just don't know that I really have an accurate frame of reference for what that dude is for the sport that you're so consumed with.
Yeah, no, I think it'd be reminiscent of when Pele came to the NASL in the 70s.
Yeah.
In late early 80s, like that was the Cosmos sold out every stadium, and it's got to be the same feel, because when you're so accomplished at the international level, like it's one thing for the average sports fan to say, oh, I know Messi, but this is someone that you grew up idolizing and watching him win all kinds of European titles, and being the Ballon d'Or winner, the best player on the planet 6 or 7 times or whatever it is, and now you're sharing the field with him. Yeah, it would be like playing with Michael Jordan. It's the same type of feel, and very few people on the planet get the opportunity to spend even a moment with some of these greats.
I have a little bit of a non sequitur odd question for you that I wanted to ask you today when I saw you on the rundown. And we're right smack dab in the middle of the NBA draft with round 1 last night, round 2 tonight. And I'm always fascinated at the dynamic of the synergies between front offices and coaching staffs and how that manifests and pertains to decision-making processes. And every front office does it different. And quite frankly, even front offices that are essentially set up the same, they do it different too, because people are just different and personalities are just different and priorities are just different and experiences are not the same. How is the process coming along, Pablo? You've had a lot of changeover. And the weird thing is a lot of changeover in the midst of some really good success. Like Elliot did build a team that was successful, and you coached a team that I thought was the most exciting we've had here maybe ever. But now there's a new ownership group. There's a new primary decision maker. You were, let's see here, strongly encouraged to embrace your new assistant coaches is how I'll put that. How is this process coming along with the different ownership, the different front office, the different coaches, and all the personalities you have in the rooms where it happens, sorry, Hamilton fans, to try to kind of figure out how you guys are going to make this work?
Yeah, as far as the draft moving forward next year,
no,
in general?
Just everything, whether it's, the synergies to try to sign players or just the project overall. Jason, Tony, Kurt, you, the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, the one thing, and that hasn't changed from last year, whilst quite a few players have come and gone from last year, the one thing that we stick to as both front office and coaching staff is our processes, and I think the one thing is because it takes time to develop really deep relationships. Like those don't happen overnight. And so the processes help us continue to be in the rooms after all the games. When there's big decisions to be made about a player, we're all in the same room. We all have open dialogue. The best idea wins, or the best idea as far as how we're going to go through the process wins. And so it's super collaborative. And I'll say that the change of ownership, whilst it just seems like it's there's a new ownership group, and their vision is, like I said earlier, is to build a team that Salt Lake fans can really wrap their arms around for many years to come. And so that's obviously trying to keep players like Diego Luna and some of our, Emeka Nelly and some of these players that are going to be the core players of the team. And so I think we're all aligned on those things. And I think that comes from having deeper relationships than just business titles. Oftentimes it's a GM and a coach, and those two have different perspectives. And Kurt and I also have different perspectives at times, but I think it's the the communication within the constant communication within that relationship that helped us both find a good middle ground to move forward as a group, and that involves Jason and Tony and the coaching staff, and then ownership as well, right? And so I think whilst it's been a lot of moving parts, I think the consistency in the same people in the room, at least from the front office and the coaching staff, has allowed for this transition to be as seamless as possible whilst working to improve the group moving forward.
So the annual, and every time this comes out, I always just kind of find it interesting to dig through this list. So the total roster spend list was released, and maybe you guys have, well, I know you have access to this, but when it becomes public, it becomes something that people debate. And, as of now, you guys are you have the third lowest payroll in Major League Soccer. How does something like that land with the head coach of the team?
Again, I know you hate hearing me say this, but like that stuff is beyond our control. There's at least beyond my control. My job is to make sure I do everything I can to get the best out of the players that we have. Obviously, there's room for growth in that department, and we're working steadfastly to improve the group and bring in some difference makers, both in the attacking side and the defensive side. And so, things obviously haven't gone the way the way we wanted them to. But I'm always the eternal optimist, and I think that through the struggles that we had in the first part of the season, I mean, I've seen it and I felt it, the maturity of the group going through some very difficult times. And now, if we can stabilize the group and get a couple more good results, and then bring in some difference makers, I think we'll set ourselves up for a good run in the second half of the season, but more importantly, next year and beyond. So, whilst the current situation has been difficult, I think, given that we have money and to spend, I think it allows us to now really be precise in the type of player that we want, type of character that we want, and the position that we need in order to really make a push.
You love when I ask you those questions. It just makes your day. I know how much you enjoy it. I appreciate your willingness to answer it. I mean, look, in a roundabout way, I'm trying to get your back, right? And that's kind of like give the guy some assets.
No, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. But you also understand, like, my standpoint.
Sure.
If I look at it from that perspective, then I'm just a victim, and I'm not helping this. I'm not trying to find a solution. I'm just tossing blame. And one of the things I never do is blame anyone. I always look at myself first, and I go, man, we got to do better, Pablo. Let's go, man. We got this, And so that's just my mindset. But yeah, I think you need to represent, level of consistency and elite performers to be perennial playoff, to be a perennial playoff team. And I think we're working towards that. Probably not as fast as some people would like, but just know that the work is getting done behind the scenes. And again, I believe in the direction we're moving in, and really proud of the way the guys played last game. The guys have trained the last couple of weeks leading into this game. So I think we've got some positive momentum moving forward.
Do you feel like going third person is an accurate portrayal of your humility, Pablo? Just kidding. I'll stop.
No, I'm just there's somebody that lives upstairs, Spence, and that's just the truth. And he's always digging in, and he's always trying to get me to do more.
Yep.
But it's not third person like the guy that's better than. It's third person like there's some person living upstairs that I'm always dealing with.
No, I know, man. I'm impossible. It's why I can't stay married. So that's the deal. All right, moving on. You referenced your last game. Let's start with Johnny Russell, who we've been waiting to see fit and inform, and opens his bank account, as the soccer folk will say. So let's start there. What was that like for you to see him tally that goal, and then expand as far as what you liked the performance overall?
Yeah, I think I'll start with just the collective team performance. Again, I think in soccer, the ideal is score a couple goals and give nothing up. And I think from top to bottom, the guys that started the game, the guys that came in the game really had a great impact. So I would look at that as a collective team performance. And then Johnny, we brought him in because we felt like we can lean on his experience, but also he can make plays. And I can show you probably 25 other times in the season where we had the same similar situation that Johnny was in, and he just capitalized on it. And I think, as he was dribbling the ball, I knew exactly what he was thinking as he was cutting across the field, is that he was going to go near post on the goalkeeper and use the other players as screen so the goalkeeper couldn't see it. And those are things that, like, again, we train them, but it's one thing to train it without pressure. It's another thing to have the game feel like a training session, right? And I think you have to be so calm and poised in those moments that are really hectic and fast. And I think Johnny's experience and his quality really allowed him to do so. So, he's been struggling with a little bit of an adductor, but I believe that he'll be in a good way for this game at the weekend. And hopefully he's going back home to KC, and he's got he's really pumped up for this game. So both him and an extra motivational aspect to their performance this weekend heading into SKC.
Oh, he's got to play, Pablo. Tell him to take whatever you need for the adductor. He's got to play on Saturday, doesn't he?
Yeah, on one leg he'd play. It'd be impossible for him not to be out in the field. And again, it was just a little strain. We were cautious with it, given that those were his first 45 minutes, and he left the game with an adductor. But he's recovered well. He's trained great this week. He's been sharp. He's been bright. And like I said, more importantly than anything else, he's motivated.
And if we're going to crack on Diogo because he hasn't played well, we need to give him flowers for when he does something. He tallied the assist on Johnny's goal with a very nice through ball.
Yeah, and the play that actually, before he actually played the through ball, Spence, was some high-level technical work.
Yep.
To like bob and weave between two or three guys. And this is what we've seen in Diogo when he's playing at his best. And really, you're absolutely right. I think it's a moment to really mention how hard, he's worked in these last couple of weeks to put himself in position to play as well as he did and contribute on a really, really important goal. He put that ball on the plate for Johnny, and and so I can't say enough things because in sports everyone thinks it's everyone's got it easy, right? These guys are well paid, everything's what could possibly be wrong, but we're all human beings, and we all suffer, and we all go through good times and bad times, and I think when professional athletes are going through a tough time, it's times 100 because of the scrutiny from the public, and it's not easy. And so what I've seen in Diogo is really this evolution of a man in a way that has he's going through probably one of the most difficult parts of his life, but then steps on the field and is one of our best players, if not our best player on the weekend. So really proud of him and really excited to see what he can continue building as we move forward.
All right, last thing, I'll set you loose on this. Kind of a sneaky big game for a number of different reasons Saturday. Mm-hmm. Namely, you and SKC are right next to each other. They've got 19, you've got 18, wanting to keep that momentum rolling. So give us a little health update. You have a chance to repeat your starting 11 for the first time in months, which is wild. What are we expecting to see Saturday? How do you come away with 3?
Yeah, I think for us, it's again, I think we've learned a lot from the games that we've played so far, and the one thing is the way we get out to the ball was really good against DC. And I think when we press higher up the field and we cause turnovers, now we got guys like Gozo and Willie and Johnny in positions to really counter, right? And I think that's going to be really important. I think the heat will play a big factor. So, again, dominating the game or controlling the game with the ball will be another critical aspect. They had a game yesterday. And so how can we really dictate the game with the ball? And I think that will be the key. So we got to execute. We've got to, take our chances when they come. But more importantly is how can we control the flow of the game with the ball? And I think we have the team to do that.
All right, buddy. Thanks for the time today. Best of luck throughout the weekend. We'll chat soon.
Awesome, Spence. Thanks, buddy.
Pablo Mastroeni, RSL back in action on Saturday. Sporting Kansas City. That's a 6:30 first kick at Children's Mercy Park. It can be seen on Apple TV, MLS Season Pass. All right, before we catch a break, excited to welcome in once again Jamie Aslett, the general manager of Keto's Brewing. Jamie, hello. Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Thanks for coming in. All right, let's just start with you brought a compendium, as they say, of different beverages. Let's just go down the list. What did you bring us today?
short of it is gluten-free.
Gluten-free.
Yeah, we are one of the only breweries in the state that can actually make gluten-free beer start to finish, and it actually tastes like beer.
Okay, so gluten-free beer that actually tastes like beer. Now, my dumb brain is simply going to ask you, it just means it's healthier than normal beer, right?
For people with celiacs, they can actually drink beer.
Okay, very nice. So let's start with my right, your left. What do we have here?
This one is actually launching tomorrow. It's not gluten-free, but
Okay.
it does have the fonio grain.
Okay.
So we'll actually start over here.
Okay, fair enough.
We are the second brewery in world history to make a beer fully out of this fonio grain, and it's an ancient grain out of Africa, drought tolerant, doesn't need pesticides, all the fun things.
Okay.
So the brewers wanted to make it into a beer, so it's half beer, half fonio grain.
Okay.
But we do have a gluten-free golden ale, a gluten-free IPA, and we are coming out with a different IPA next month.
Very nice. Very nice. So for our listeners that have gluten sensitivities, you can now drink beer and feel okay about it.
Yes.
All right, good stuff.
It is 100% gluten-free.
All right, so you guys are the largest brewery in Utah. We already talked about, let's reset for listeners who may have missed it. You went to the North American Brewers competition and came away with medals. Tell us about those.
We won gold for the Suki Rice Lager collaboration,
Mm-hmm.
our blonde ale, and we won a bronze for the coffee cream ale.
Very nice. So award-winning, ketosbrewing.com. Jamie, before I set you loose, anything else you want our listeners to know?
No. Our regular fonio will be back in stock in the next 2 weeks. The gluten-free IPA is experimental, so we're messing around with it a little bit, and it'll be ready in about 4 weeks.
Very nice. So you can
All
find
available
at the tap room and also state liquor stores. I know you're
Nope, they're all
Not
at
yet.
5%.
Oh.
Not at the liquor stores, but you can buy them at restaurants and bars.
Okay.
It will not be on tap, unfortunately, at those locations because we don't trust people to clean their lines out, and we don't want to contaminate it with gluten.
This is a much more involved process than I ever understood. I think most people probably have no idea how many details you actually have to come over to make this stuff happen.
Mm-hmm.
Less alone the laws around here that change quite a bit, right? You have to traverse that space as well.
Yes.
All right.
It's a lot of staying in touch and teaching all of my bar staff about the new rules.
And that is like you're the GM, so you're in charge of all that.
Yes.
All right, so taproom, ketosbrewing.com. And Jamie, it's great to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Check it out. Gluten-free beers, North America Brewers Award winners, a bunch of medals, Utah's largest brewery, our good friends at Ketos Brewing. Go to ketosbrewing.com. All right, we got 2 hours down, 2 hours to go. Well, actually, we have 2 hours down, like 8 hours to go because we're doing the second round of the draft because we're morons. We'll bring in Neil Smith coming up next. The Utah Mammoth made a trade, and we'll talk some NHL offseason storylines right here on ESPN 700. All right, we got round 2 of the NBA draft tonight. We covered round 1 for you from start to finish last night, which means your boy got home at about 10 o'clock. Nice little 8-hour radio shift yesterday. We'll see what tonight brings. I believe it's only 4 minutes between picks tonight for round 2. However, we do have the NHL draft coming up tomorrow, and the Utah Mammoth will draft 4th overall after receiving a little lottery luck. And the Utah Mammoth also made a trade. So we'll talk about that and a bunch more NHL offseason stuff with our next guest, the great Neil Smith. Back on the drive on a Thursday. Neil, happy Thursday, sir. How are you?
I'm real good, thank you. That was quite a trade for the Mammoth.
So let's start there. Ultimately, Josh Doan, Michael Kesselring, 2 players that a lot of people around here liked an awful lot. But let's get to know this new player. It looked like the Sabres were going to part ways, restricted free agent. JJ, I think it's Peterka is how you say the name, Neil. Tell us about this young man, and what do you think of the trade?
Well, he's a German from Munich, Germany, and I think it's a great trade for Utah. If you go strictly on getting the best player, they definitely got the best players. Peterka's got 27 goals last year, 68 points. He's a threat. He's a definite upgrade for the hockey club. When I say hockey club, you still call the teams hockey clubs. I'm not saying that as the old name.
Sure. Yeah.
But I like Michael Kesselring. He's a big kid, and it brings some real size. But when you get a chance to get a guy like Peterka, you've got to part with a couple of guys, and Josh Doan is only 23, but that's the same age as Peterka, so that's great for the Utah Mammoth, because they're getting a young guy, and as we've talked about so many times, this is like their free agent. He's not a free agent. It was a trade, but it's like free agency coming early for this team.
27 goals, 41 assists last year for Peterka, 68 points overall. So let's dig in a little bit deeper. He's a right winger. You mentioned he's German. I mean, I've got some stuff in front of me right now. He looks like a big, sturdy kid. So for our Utah Mammoth fans out here, let's dig a little bit deeper. Exactly what type of player is he? Where do you think he fits? A top 6 forward? Do you think he's on the front line? How do you think it plays out?
I think he could end up on the first line. He certainly end up on the power play. He's an offensive threat all the time. He played 77 games and got 68 points. So you're almost at a point a game on Buffalo Sabres, who didn't make the playoffs and didn't have a great season. And if I want to be sarcastic, I could say that Utah might be headed for the Stanley Cup, because Buffalo has traded away so many guys that have ended up winning the Stanley Cup, like Sam Reinhart, and just to mention one, and a number of others, that maybe luck will have it with Utah this time, and Peterka will end up in a Utah jersey winning the Stanley Cup.
Love it. 5-year contract extension. Average annual value is about $7.7 million. What are your thoughts on the deal that Bill Armstrong gave Peterka?
It's the money, of course, is to normal everyday folks is crazy money, but it's where the player would be because of the production he's getting and the production that he will get going forward. And I'm sure that Bill and his staff have analyzed Peterka a lot better than me and see that a real bright future in front of him. And again, I'll emphasize he's only 23 years old. By the time the contract's over, he's still in his prime at 28. So he's going to have to live up to those numbers. That's a lot of money for a kid that scored 27 goals. But I would imagine that they see in him, him getting better and better as time goes on, and that's why they were willing to do that contract.
Do you think this trade and this acquisition changes the approach for tomorrow night's draft?
Not at all. Not at all. They'll take if I were them, when the first 3 guys get picked, whoever's the best player, no matter what position, no matter what country he comes from, no matter anything, that's who you take. You don't draft based on position or anything like that. At that high pick, get the best player you can possibly get and figure it out later. If you've got, if it's a center that's available and you've already got centers, don't worry about it. And if it's a defenseman, you've already got defenseman. Don't worry about it. So I think they'll get a real good player at number 4. Probably won't play in Salt Lake, this coming season, but they'll definitely get a good player.
So before we get to the specifics of what tomorrow could bring, just take us behind the scenes of a NHL front office the night before the NHL draft. What's going on with Bill and his staff right now as they prepare to make the selections tomorrow?
They're just having more meetings, and it is not up in the air who they're going to pick for them right now. They already know who the top 4 players are in the draft according to their staff, and they're well prepared. They're probably talking a lot about their second pick. I don't have it in front of me where their second pick is in the draft, but I would think they're spending more of their time trying to figure out who the 4th guy would be, because they know who they've got as the top 4 guys, and whoever's the best of those top 4 would be the guy that they'll take at number 4.
So let's move over now to what tomorrow night could bring. And, obviously it depends on what happens in front of them. Does it, once upon a time, it felt like number 1 was being debated, but everything I'm reading today, Neil, is that it will be Matthew Schaefer to the Islanders. Is that your understanding?
That's my understanding, that he's pretty clear cut the best player. There's always some talk because the Islanders have our Long Island, and Hagens, who played at in Hockey East this year, is from Long Island, and he grew up in Long Island. So, wouldn't you try to get the hometown kid? But you can't do that when you're running an NHL team. You've got to take the best player, and by everybody's accounts, Matthew Schaefer's the best player, and he's a big defenseman, and I would imagine that's where the Islanders will go.
So if it's Schaefer at 1, I've got a mock draft in front of me. Do you feel like it's the Michael Misa kid at 2 for San Jose?
That's what I'm hearing. That's what I'm hearing. Michael Misa would go number 2. A lot of people don't have Hagens 3. They got somebody else. But, once you get past the very high guys, it doesn't always go in any predictable manner, because what's one person's taste in a player is not another person, so you can't always depend on that. But so I don't think it's clear cut that these are definitely the top 3. But from what I'm hearing, Misa and Schaefer are the top 2. And Misa could go number 1. He had a remarkable season. He got 30 more points than anybody else in the OHL, and that's remarkable. He got 62 goals in 65 games, but they're hard to get franchise defensemen. And if Matthew Schaefer's thought of as a franchise defenseman, they're probably going to go there.
OHL, Ontario Hockey League. It seems like a lot of these young prospects are playing up there. Tell our listeners about this and what sort of league it is and how it prepares these young men to play in the NHL.
Well, and then that's a good question, Spence, because, your listeners are mostly used to players being drafted out of college, because that's where the NBA players come from. And a lot of NHL players come out of college too, but they also come out of the 3 Canadian major junior leagues, what they're called. And going from west to east, that's the Western Hockey League, which has all the teams west of Ontario. You have the Ontario Hockey League, which has, most of their teams are in Ontario. They do have Erie, Erie, Pennsylvania is in that league. And then you have the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. And the Memorial Cup is the tournament at the end of the season between the 3 leagues to see who's going to win the big trophy for all of junior hockey. It's a mini NHL, to be honest with you. Junior hockey in Canada is the closest representation to the National Hockey League and what you've got to do there, the travel and all the rest of it, and the game itself is like a mini NHL. So that's why a lot of scouts and teams prefer to take guys out of the major junior hockey. But I think that now college hockey is every bit as good a breeding ground for the NHL as the junior leagues.
You're getting good at this because you just answered my follow-up question, but I'm going to ask it anyway to elaborate. Of all of the potential avenues, of all of the potential pathways, when it comes to these different leagues when it comes to these different, avenues that these young men take, whether it's college hockey, whether it's the OHL or what have you? Is there a clear-cut preferred pathway? Again, college, OHL, international, whatever it is, because I've got this mock draft in front of me, and I'm seeing, like, even throughout the first 10, there's the WHL, there's the OHL, there's the QMJHL, whatever that is. Then there's college.
That's the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League.
Okay, so of all the pathways, Neil, is there a preferred one you look at as a roster constructor and a decision maker to feel like, yes, they're prepared the best because they did this?
Not really. I mean, they're. I'll give you some examples. Connor McDavid played for Erie. That's where he was drafted by Edmonton from Erie. His sidekick there, Draisaitl, played in Germany, and so there's two totally different places. You can, Nathan McKinnon played in the Quebec League, who's a great player. So they come from all over the place, and there's a lot of great college players that are coming into the NHL now. So there's really not a preferred place. There used to be a very prejudicial to junior players because they understood and they weren't out getting an education. They were out to play hockey, but that's not the case anymore. It's really not. That now you're getting them from everywhere. I just found out today and realized it today that Michael Kesselring was born in Florence, South Carolina. I didn't realize that. I don't think he lived there. I think he was just born there. And his dad played in the ECHL. I didn't know all that stuff. But what I'm saying to you, why I'm bringing that up, is the players are coming from all over the place now, and there's really not one hockey hotbed like there used to be.
All right, so to your point, we don't know what the first three picks will be. It does feel like the Schaefer kid is the consensus number one, and every mock I've seen has Misa at 2. And then it seems to get pretty interesting. Anton Frondell is the mock I have in front of me, going 3 to Chicago. Brady Martin is the name that this mock has the Utah Mammoth taking, but I've seen another mock that has Porter Martone, the selection at 4. And Porter is a big forward that prior to yesterday, this hockey club did not have, but now they have one of those. Any thoughts? Then there's the aforementioned James Hagan's kid out of BC. Any thoughts on who Bill and his staff land on tomorrow night when the 4th pick is called?
There's talk about Brady Martin that plays in Sault Ste. Marie. I'd be guessing, to be honest with you, Spence. I'm just going to flat out say it. I'd be guessing if I said who I thought they would take. I don't have the expertise on these young kids, but I do see on some of the rating things that Hagan's has fallen down in people's minds. So you never know. You don't know what intel Bill and his staff have on all these particular players. There's also psychological inventory testing done that way to see what kind of character, what kind of personality you're dealing with. So then that comes into play on it. So we'll just have to wait and see. And I think your guess at this point is every bit as good as mine.
Well, it's interesting, Neil. I was on a Zoom call with Bill 2 days ago prior to the Peterka deal, and he's very calculated with his messaging, and he's very careful not to promise anything. I mean, I've told you this anecdote when the introductory press conference took place where the fan base here was meeting that team for the first time, several of whom probably didn't have any frame of reference for what they were witnessing or how good or bad this team was. It was just excitement that we had hockey in Salt Lake. And Liam O'Brien took the mic and really fired up the audience at Delta Center. Spicy tuna, people started chanting. And when Bill had the opportunity to address the crowd, he basically said, look, everyone knows we're still rebuilding, right? Like, he's very careful about setting expectations. And the messaging during his Zoom call was the continued patience and the continued long game and the continued we're making good decisions one by one, and we'll see how it stacks up. So reasonable expectations probably for either the 4th pick or the rest of the moves. Peterka's 23 to your point. Like, I don't know that this is a front office that's in any hurry to expedite this process. I think they're very committed to what they've already done and are going to continue to see it through until it's, a finished product on the other side.
Well, and that's smart because, first of all, keeping in anything in life, keeping expectations in check is smart because you get yourself in a world of hurt if you start over promising and under delivering. In the hockey business, I think that's real smart. The teams that are elite teams, Edmonton, Florida, obviously, they weren't built overnight. They didn't just go bang and get it and work, become that good. It took many years and thoughtful construction to get them there. And I would imagine that Bill's, in his mind, he's going, this is the same thing. Now, you and I have talked about their chances to make the playoffs next year. I'm still going to stick to what I said. They're going to be fighting to get into the wild card spot. Last year at this time, Steve Yzerman and the Detroit Red Wings thought that they'd be a playoff team or could be a playoff team coming up this season. It didn't happen. Things went wrong, and it just didn't happen. And had Steve Yzerman come out and said, "Oh, we're going to make the playoffs this year," well, now everybody's ticked off because you said you'd make the playoffs and you didn't. It's always better to over deliver.
Players that could be on the move that you guys are honed in on before I set you loose, Neil.
Well, there was we had a lot of talk about the big guys. Well, we had a lot of talk about the big guys that are free, that are UFAs, unrestricted free agents. And of course, Mitch Marner from Toronto heads the list because he's not going back to Toronto, his hometown. So he's going to be out there looking for mega bucks. Sam Bennett has said at some of the celebrations that he's staying in Florida and he wants to stay in Florida. So we'll see what happens with that. I can't imagine him being let go, Florida letting him leave. Brad Marchand, the elder statesman of the team, 37 years old, but proved that he's an awesome playoff player. He's out there, and he's been a leader. He's been captain of the Boston Bruins. We talked about all those guys. We talked about Florida, and could they keep their team together, and the job that Bill Zito had done. So, and then we also talked about Connor McDavid and his contract because he's got 1 year to go, and then he's a UFA if Edmonton lets it get there, which I will never imagine that they'll let it get there. But Connor McDavid came out last week and said he's in no hurry to get a contract done, that he wants to know that the team is going to be trying to win every year and doing everything they can to win a Stanley Cup in Edmonton before he's going to re-sign there. So that was a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about, and we'll have to wait and see what happens on Monday. We were talking about tampering too a little bit because that's so obvious that goes on before the July 1st. Because Spence, if anybody announces on July 1st that they signed somebody anytime before 2 o'clock, they didn't make a deal in 2 hours on those things. So do you know what I mean? Last year they were announcing deals at 12:05. I mean, if you can do a 7-year deal in 5 minutes, that's pretty good.
Yeah, look, it happens in every sport. How do you govern that though? Like, whether it's NHL, NFL, NBA, it's so very blatantly obvious that it goes down. But is there really any way to stop it?
There really isn't, because there's so many ways to get information. So, it's if somebody lets the cat out of the bag, that's about the only way that, somebody wants to screw somebody and say, well, so-and-so called me. And it's not the general managers that are doing it. They're not going to call anybody and put themselves out there, but they got people that will get information and can find out if this guy wants to play. Is there any chance that Sam Bennett will sign with Utah? Somebody talks to his agent, somebody talks to his parents, somebody talks to his brother, somebody talks to somebody and says, tell me, is Sam going to consider any place else? And if they said, oh, yeah, he is. He definitely wants to see where you think he'd consider Salt Lake? Yeah, for sure, if the money's there. Those kind of conversations, you go back, you tell the GM, now he's waiting to see. Like, they don't negotiate anything, I'm sure, or that would be really dumb. But they do get their feelers out there and find out what's possible.
Neil, where can people go find the podcast that you guys, do in general, but also that you just did on the free agent primer and draft primer, and the draft is tomorrow night?
Yeah, just go to our website, NHLwraparound.com, or go on to Apple or Spotify or iHeart or any place where you listen to podcasts and see it there, or YouTube if you want to watch it. But Pierre LeBrun was on. He was really good. We had, before that, and I think I mentioned this to you last week, we had Pat Verbeek on, who had just traded for Kreider. And now Pat Verbeek made another big trade this past week in trading Trevor Zegras to Philadelphia. That's going to be real interesting to see if Zegras turns out to be a good player with Rick Tocchet as his coach, and that's going to be a very interesting one. But anyway, there's always news going on at this time of year.
Neil, thank you, sir. Always a pleasure. Fun perspective on the eve of the draft. Have a great weekend. We'll chat soon. Thank you.
And good luck to the Mammoth.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. The great Neil Smith, roster constructor at the highest of levels, won a Stanley Cup with the Blue Sweaters, the New York Rangers in 1994, worked for the Detroit Red Wings and also the New York Islanders. Check out his podcast, NHL Wraparound. Get him on Twitter at NYC Neil is where you find him. All right, the Utah Stampede Rodeo is on the way. Extreme Bowls. Extreme Bowls, Porter, not just bowls.
There you go.
Extreme Bowls.
You know what that means.
I do. Of course I do. I am an extreme bull.
There you go.
We learned yesterday that you used to ride small bulls as a small child.
Was subjected to it, I guess.
Okay. Subjected to it. All right. You can find tickets at UteStampedeRodeo.com. That's UteStampedeRodeo.com. It's July the 9th through the 12th in Nephi, Utah. All right. Coming up on the other side, it's time for a little sports court with our friends from Handy and Handy. It is Sports Court time. We do it every Thursday, right about now, with our good friends over at Handy and Handy. Both of them today, Garrett and Preston Handy. Gentlemen, happy Thursday. How are we doing?
Hey, Spence. Good to be here.
Hi, Spence.
Appreciate the time, as always. So let's get into it. Let's see here. We'll start with a story out of the NFL. Powerful NFL executive group, along with the commissioner's approval, according to what I'm reading, encourage teams to collude in the name of decreasing guaranteed dollars in veteran contracts. This is kind of some new information. Guys, unpack it for us.
Well, I'll tell you about the ultimate decision. So this grows out of a meeting that happened in March 2022 when the NFL, the owners, and the NFLPA, that's the Players Association union that represents the players, got together. And this was on the heels of our guy Deshaun Watson, who is not only infamous for a lot of things, but he's famous for getting a $250 million guaranteed contract. And the claim is by the NFLPA is that the owners, the NFL, they got together and they saw this as a bad thing, and they talked about it and said, hey, we can't have these guaranteed contracts anymore. Those are the allegations. And they pointed to a few contracts, notably Kyler Murray, who got a $230 million contract, but only $160 million guaranteed. Russell Wilson, only $165 guaranteed. And our guy, Lamar Jackson, boo-hoo, only got $185 million guaranteed. Well, the NFLPA brought a case against the NFL and the owners, and we know that you can't really bring a case in court for the most part. What do you got to do? You have to go through arbitration. So an arbitrator heard all of this stuff, and apparently the decision was leaked recently. This happened in January, and apparently a lot of players testified, but also owners testified, and the owners testified that, hey, wait a minute, that would be really dumb of us. We're all competing for good players, and for us to get into an agreement here where we don't want to give the best deal to players and weaken our stance and weaken our negotiating standpoint against other teams just really doesn't make sense. You know, I guess the reasoning behind the NFLPA was, well, the owners got together here and they're saying, hey, we want to just limit these things here. And so, well, it went to arbitration, and the arbitrator came down, as you pointed out, Spence. It's kind of you know, mixed messages here. Kind of the reasoning was they say, well, the owners may have they had to think how to spend, and the type of messaging wasn't to establish collusion. He said that there was no evidence the presenters explicitly asked the clubs to join together in agreement to restrict growth of guaranteed salaries and bonuses. And the ruling was that the owners may have encouraged all of the teams in the NFL to reduce guaranteed in future contracts, but there was no evidence of collusion. So it kind of came down on the side of the owners and the NFL on this one.
All right, Gary, you're up, buddy.
Well, I know the owners scoffed at the idea that they would ever collude to do this, but there is some precedent for it. Back in the 80s, Major League Baseball owners were found to have colluded not offer contracts to free agents. So it's not so far-fetched.
All right, moving over to a story out of Major League Baseball. Fernando Tatis is sued against Big League Advance Fund, and Big League Advantage will likely face hurdles, including potentially being dismissed. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, the story is, I mean, when Fernando Tatis was an 18-year-old coming out of the Dominican Republic minor league player, he signed a contract with an outfit called Big League Advance Fund, where he would pay them 10% of his future earnings for $2 million. And I guess back in 2017, when he's an 18-year-old and did this, it seemed like a good idea at the time. But 4 years later, you know, he signed a $340 million contract. So that would be $34 million would be the 10% going to Big League Advance Fund. And so he's brought a lawsuit, and California, you know, has some pretty favorable consumer laws, you know, in this area, and I think that's what they're relying on. And what it's really going to come down to is how do you characterize this? You know, is it a loan? Is it a income sharing agreement? Is it an investment? How is that going to be construed? Because this California financing law will prohibit any predatory financial activities, and that's what they're essentially saying. Is they're saying, hey, this was a consumer loan, masquerading as an investment, but at this point, I mean, I don't know what the percentage is. It's like 2,000% interest or something that he's really paying. I mean, it's a huge number, but their side of this is to say, well, we took a risk on you when you were a nobody and you were 18 years old, and sometimes those don't pan out for us, and this one is panning out in a very big way. So they'll litigate that under California's, again, what I'm saying are favorable consumer laws.
All right, Preston, you're up, bud.
Yeah, I mean, I learned something on this, and I didn't know this, knew this even happened, but Big League Advance is an investment firm, essentially a venture capital firm, that gives upfront cash payments to minor league baseball players in exchange for a percentage of their future earnings. They're taking a chance on them. They're betting on them essentially, and it's essentially offering them financial assistance during development in the minor leagues. And I agree with what Garrett said. I mean, there's this issue of, they came in and said, hey, it's not a loan, it's us betting on you. And for all the guys we bet on, guess what? There's a lot of them we invest in and give them this upfront cash that doesn't pan out, and they really never can. And probably part of the agreement is if you don't ever get a contract and you're done, it's going to be really hard for them to collect it on these players. One of the other issues is that we talk about this always. Guess what might happen? He's sued, but guess what? It might be kicked to arbitration under the Players Association, the bargaining agreements, and that type of thing.
All right, moving over to a story that we have covered. It's pretty wild to me with my knowledge of this basketball program back in New York, Riverside. Looks like they're going to have to face a trial because the judge has denied what's called a summary judgment. You're the expert, so the time is yours.
Yeah, Spence, we have talked about this in the background. You mentioned Riverside Church was an entity back in 35 years ago who essentially sponsored really good teams. And back then it was AAU, and the comp leagues that we now have just blown up. But in that time, they sponsored some of the best teams in the country. They even were groundbreaking in having sponsorships. They helped place teams or players with competitive schools, got them scholarships, kind of helped them through that process. Well, back in the day, there was our guy, Ernest Lorch, who we've talked about before, who did a lot of great things. He did a lot of great things in supporting this and financially supporting it and even coaching these teams and bringing it along. And, we've mentioned that there are several NBA players who played in the Riverside Church program. Well, Ernest Lorch allegedly, and I think has been proven, was also involved in sexual assault to a lot of these players. And, some criminal stuff was brought, but now what's going on is a civil lawsuit has been brought by one of the players, Daryl Powell. And he's brought the lawsuit not against Ernest Lorch, but against Riverside Church. And his claim essentially is, hey, Ernest Lorch was under your supervision. You sponsored this. You knew or should have known this stuff was going on, and even points to different things where it says they actually had knowledge of this and didn't do anything about it. Well, Riverside Church responds to this as it's going through litigation, and they file a motion for summary judgment. And what a motion for summary judgment is, you go to the judge and say, hey, Judge, we think there are no undisputed facts. We all agree on the facts, but as a matter of law, you can rule on this and pretty much end this so it doesn't proceed through litigation and make it to trial. And their main claim was, we didn't know, nor should we have known about this. We sponsored it, but it's not like we were involved in the day-to-day operations or helping involve this and watching the games and coaching and that type of thing. We were just kind of a sponsor for these teams, and we thought it was a good thing, and these youth getting involved in this program. But the judge came back with this motion for summary judgment, said, no, she goes, I think there are way too many facts out there, too many allegations. I think there are 12 players that have jumped on board on this, and these facts are in dispute, and there's a basis for these facts, and so I'm not going to grant your motion. And she's not essentially saying, hey, you plaintiff, you win your case. What she's saying is that this gets to proceed and go to trial and let it. She thinks these are issues that are better heard for the jury. And Powell and the other plaintiff, Daryl Powell, they've alleged a lot of emotional and mental anguish from this. So they've got damages to prove. But what's going to happen now? It's going to continue down the litigation path. That doesn't mean it won't settle at some point. But what the judge has said, no, we're not going to end this now, and there's too many factual issues that need to be decided by a jury.
All right, Garrett, you're up, bud.
Well, I think something that people may wonder about is how a case that's so old, these claims are even brought at this point. I mean, a lot of these plaintiffs, they're like in their 50s and 60s. I mean, this is abuse that allegedly happened in the mid 70s and the 80s. But just really quick, what happened, why these claims are not barred by the statute of limitations is in 2019, New York passed the Child Victims Act, and it just essentially opened a window and said, okay, if you've got these old claims of sexual assault and abuse, you have a window here and a chance to bring those. And so that's what happened, and that's why this case is being brought, even though these are, decades and decades old, these allegations.
All right, moving over to the world of college football, and honestly, I'm surprised this hasn't happened more. But the University of Wisconsin has filed a lawsuit claiming that the University of Miami football team broke the law by tampering with a Badgers player. Like I said, I feel like this is something that I anticipated happening a lot, but this is first of its kind. What can you tell us?
Yeah, I'm with you on that, Spence. I am surprised that we have not seen this more. And so this is kind of a first of its kind, maybe watershed case. But essentially, I mean, Wisconsin signed this Xavier Lucas, and he signed a 2-year deal, a contract with Wisconsin and their NIL collective, regarding their NIL rights. And then in December, he wanted to put his name in the transfer portal. And Wisconsin said, no, we're not going to put your name in the portal. You've got a 2-year contract with us. And anyway, in the meantime, the story is he's meeting with Miami and sitting in a booster's living room in Miami. And, these Miami contacts are telling him, hey, we're going to give you a better deal. Come to Miami. And lo and behold, he does. He enrolls, played spring ball there. And so really the question is, can schools use the NIL contract to keep them from transferring? I mean, that's really the issue, where they're not an employee, they're not part of a union. And so that's what's going to be decided. And on this athlete's side of things, he's saying, well, hey, Wisconsin, you guys have, you've violated some rules by not allowing me to enter the transfer portal. I think that's really a side issue and a red herring. I mean, the big issue here is Wisconsin suing Miami. I mean, it's one university suing another university saying, you interfered with our player, with our recruit. And they're really, it's been called a tampering case, but it's really tortious interference. I mean, this is a civil claim where they're saying we had a deal, we had a contract with this player, and you guys come in knowing that there's a deal and that there's a contract behind our backs, and you've, lured him away. So, like you said, Spence, I'm surprised we haven't seen more of this, and maybe we will now that, the House settlement's kicking in and those payments are going to begin with these NIL contracts, and schools can start paying directly. But from Wisconsin's standpoint, they're saying, hey, we've got to do this so that we can bring some stability to the transfer portal issue of players bouncing around so much.
All right, Preston, you're up, buddy.
Yeah, just one thing. I think I agree with you, Spence, and Garrett hit on a lot of it, that, hey, Wisconsin's not they're trying to enforce contractual obligations, but they're not going to the player who essentially breached the contract. They're suing Miami, and they're not going to an administrative group like the NCAA or any overseeing, entity. They're actually going to court and suing the University of Miami and saying, you interfered with this tortious interference with the contract, and we want to get some clarity here. And yeah, they even said in their complaint, we're during this watershed time for college athletics. We're trying to get some clarity here and some integrity in what's going on. So I think this is an important lawsuit.
Last one for today. James Harden has been accused of negligence in a civil complaint filed in Harris County, Texas. The space is yours. What do we got here?
Yeah, this kind of hit the news today. Garrett found it out there, and essentially what it is, this is a New Year's Eve party that was at James Harden's house. And James Harden's house, I'm sure, is amazing. And what does he have? He has a lot of security around his house. Well, people were showing up randomly at this house, and one of the people that showed up at this home was a was a woman, and she, through the night, became really intoxicated, and as a result of that, now she's bringing allegations that she was sexually assaulted and raped. And the perpetrator, the one that allegedly had done it, was James Harden's nephew, Armani Blackburn. So what she's done now is she has brought a lawsuit not against Armani Blackburn, but against James Harden. And her claim essentially is, hey, you had this thing going on and you had security there, and the purpose of the security was to protect people there. And these security guards, their sole purpose was to provide security, and they were authorized agents of James Harden, and they were in the course and scope of their employment with James Harden. And so as a result, whatever happened that night, the acts of his nephew, but also the negligence, she's claiming negligence of the security guards, you are vicariously liable for this. So this is a situation that happens in employment situations where someone, is liable as an employee. Their employer is also vicariously liable. It's called respondeat superior, and that's why they're going after James, obviously because he's the deep pocket, but also because, they're claiming he's responsible for this, and the agents of his that are in his agency. And she's claiming emotional damage from this, and this is just getting going here, and she'll have to prove her damages, but that's the basis of the lawsuit.
All right, Garrett, you're up, bud.
Another fact. I mean, she was, the allegation is she was unconscious, and that upon arriving to the party, that Harden's nephew gave her a drink, and apparently was something in it, and that she was just out of it. And so there's that. I mean, the other thing I was thinking of is I wonder how James Harden has, set up any security, whether it's really, maybe he's got a separate company or something like that manages and runs kind of his affairs as opposed to him personally. So I'd be curious to know, there could be some wrangling over who's really the correct party. Of course, from a plaintiff standpoint, it brings a lot of attention to the case to be able to name James Harden personally, which is why this thing hits the news like this.
All right, gentlemen, before I set you loose on a Thursday, for any of our listeners who have legal questions, how do they get a hold of you over at Handy and Handy?
Yeah, well, we'd love to talk to anybody who's got any legal questions out there, especially in the area of personal injury, which is what we do. If you've been injured in an accident, give us a call. You can reach us at 801-264-6677 or go to our website, handylawutah.com.
Thanks, guys. Have a great weekend. And, of course, as always, go Utes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ben.
Go Utes.
Go Utes.
All right, we got 3 hours down. We've got, a lot to go. 5 o'clock hour of the program is next. And then when we say goodnight at 6, myself, Richard Smith, will take through the second round of the NBA draft. So stay tuned right here on ESPN 700. Oh, hell yes. Is this in honor of, the big bulls that the rodeo bros are going to be riding coming up in Nephi?
There we go. Extreme bowls.
Extreme bowls. Yes.
Extreme.
Is there a term for the mini bowls that the kids ride?
I think that's it. I think it's just the mini bowls.
We got mini bowls and extreme bowls coming up. It is it officially rodeo season as our unofficial rodeo experts?
Yes.
Is that it's rodeo season?
Yes.
Okay.
You get around, 4th of July, you get around end of June and into August. That's rodeo season. Yeah, the extreme bowls, just to be clear, those are like all-stars. They're from different stock contractors, if you will.
Okay.
So they're coming all around the country to meet up with the best bull riders.
So do like scouts go analyze the measurements of the bulls?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like the NBA draft.
These are animal athletes, as you'll hear them called on rodeo venues. And yeah, they get scored just as the bull riders, the rough stock fellas do.
It seems like it's somewhat cruel, correct? I mean, as somebody who loves animals and loves bull riding, how do you ascertain your feelings between that dynamic?
There are certain events that are a little uneasy to me, but I guess my justification for it is rodeo more so started with making events out of like ranching things that you're doing anyway, right? You're roping cattle, you're living off the land, and you're also having to break this horse, and so you can ride it and use it as a tractor before tractors were a thing. That's where rodeo was born. Now it's become more of a sport, obviously, but I guess that's my justification for it is the roots.
Okay, fair enough. I will cede to you when it comes to topics such as this. You have the knowledge that I do not.
We need to get you on a bull.
No
mini
way,
bull,
dude. Not now. I'm 47, bro. I tore my meniscus golfing 2 years ago. I'm not getting on a bull.
Fair enough.
All right, let's get out of here. Coming up, round 2 of the NBA draft, because why not? All right, Porter, before we get out of here, you are in charge of the program tomorrow. I'm taking a quick little weekend to see a buddy of mine that I haven't seen for a number of years. So what comes our way on a Friday show?
On a Friday edition of The Drive, we'll have Andy Larson stopping by, of course, post round 2 of the NBA draft. Chris Kamrani, a Friday staple on the show. We'll get a little PGA Tour leaderboard update from our guy Paul Pugmire out on the links. And then Matt Brown stops by the show. A lot of college football, a lot of business of college sports news this week, including some realignment with some in-state teams. So we'll get to all that with Matt Brown and more.
All right, there you go. So give Porter your attention tomorrow. He's going to be working hard to make sure the show is in good hands while I just take a minute off. I'll be back on Monday. We'll say goodnight for this Thursday show. Special thank you to Richard Smith, Pablo Mastroeni, Neil Smith, and our good friends at Sports Court. For any of the sound you may have missed, websites ESPN700sports.com. Download our mobile app and take us on the go. Best way to listen to the station is our ESPN 700 app that's available for free in the App Store, the Google Play Store. Then for what we do in our space every afternoon for 4 hours, check out our podcast page. It's called The Drive with Spence Checketts. It's available wherever you get your shows. Subscribe, rate, review, say nice things in the comments, give us all the stars. It actually helps. Reporter, I'm Spence saying goodnight. Coming up on the other side, more of me and Richard Smith. It's round 2 of the NBA draft. Coming up right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. We are proud to be part of Utah's ESPN Radio Network.